Welcome to the Caribbean Property Investing Podcast, where we share real-life experiences for successful Caribbean property entrepreneurs. Learn about their successes, challenges, and strategies to help you create your plan for financial freedom. Now let's get started.
Welcome to episode 3 of the Caribbean Property Investing Podcast. My name is Ansem. We want to thank you again for joining us on this journey to financial freedom through knowledge and life shared experiences by our guests. Today, we have a very special guest to you because we are following up from our first and second show. The second show was about how you can get into the property investing space. And perhaps the easiest way, the earliest stage is perhaps purchasing a piece of land and then subdividing it. Now, based on the feedback I received, we're going to step 2, another form of investing, and that is where you purchase what we call a fixer-upper. You purchase a building that may need some work and may be cheaper than going through the entire process of acquiring land, getting plans, and starting a brand new construction. Our guest today has had an amazing experience, and all my guests, I'm always impressed with what they've done, and that's why they are on the show now. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our guest for episode 3 as we tackle the issue of renovation in property investing, Mr. Thomas Leonce. Good afternoon, Thomas. Welcome to the podcast.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mathrain. Thank you for having me, man.
We're sharing and we like the reception that we've gotten so far. We thank all of our listeners and viewers because the information is so rich. So why don't you tell our viewers and listeners about yourself, about Thomas Leonce?
Okay. Well, I was born in the southern part of St. Lucia in the village of Labrie. I spent it's part about my life growing up there. I went to school, primary school, secondary school, and I eventually moved to Castries to pursue tertiary education at the South Always Community College. And of course, one thing led to another. I ended up getting a job in the north, following which I went to study overseas to obtain my bachelor's degree, came back to St. Lucia, and of course continued working in the north of St. Lucia. So that's been my journey so far in terms of how I moved around. But from a career perspective, I've been in the private sector, I was rather, in the private sector in terms of working for another entity or other entities for the better part of 20 years, Anselm. But always in the back of my mind, I was saying, someday I'd want to have people working for me instead, or better yet, have money working for me instead. So that's always there. And it was, what do I need to do to get to that point? You know.
So what field were you in the private sector, and how did that role help kind of accelerate your thinking and your desire to be self-employed?
Well, it wasn't so much my experience in the private sector. That desire was sparked a lot earlier, so I'll come to that. But in terms of the private sector, I've always been in what is called the fast-moving consumer goods industry. Fast-moving consumer goods are goods that you consume on a regular basis. It's different to like a cell phone or telecommunications. You buy a phone and have it for 4 or 5 years. So fast-moving consumer goods, you buy the good and you consume it in a matter of perhaps hours, days, or even weeks, and it's gone. But more specifically, it was the beverage industry, the beverage distribution and manufacturing. So the better part of my career was spent in that, working with a distributor of, initially a distributor importing beverage into St. Lucia, Caribbean, for about 3 or 4 years. Then I moved from the beverage industry to the tobacco industry, where I worked based in St. Lucia for 2 years, and I was moved to Trinidad for another 2.5 years in the tobacco industry for a company called West Indian Tobacco. So after 4.5 years with that, in that industry, I moved back to St. Lucia and I went back into the beverage industry, this time with the local manufacturer, Winwood and Leeward Brewery, where I spent the better part of 12 years or so. So a lot of my career has been in that business. The last, maybe about 2 years ago, I moved over to the events industry, if you want to call it that. But that was a brief stint for about 2.5 years. So that was the sum total of my career so far. But like I said, it was always a dream to move into, become a full-fledged entrepreneur, so to speak. And I did mention to you earlier on, Ansem, that that desire was sparked a lot earlier on because my mom, I would say, is a full-time or was a full-time entrepreneur. So that's where that whole desire was sparked. That one day I could become like that and not having to work for somebody else, but make it sustainable so they could pay me, so to speak. Yeah.
And how did that lead to property investing? Tell us about that journey.
Well, of course, I met with my partner, who's now my wife, when I was studying overseas. And even, well, of course, when you do that, you eventually get married and then you move out of the parental home. And so we went to rent actually a house, and we stayed in that house for about 5 years, I think. And at some point, we decided that we wanted to build our own home. So we acquired land or property in 2001 and went about getting all the plans put in place to construct our home on it. But at some point, the owner of the house, who resided overseas, decided that they want to sell the house. And they made an offer at a certain price, which we rejected, and indicated that I was about to build my own property, build my own house, and the price that they gave me was pretty close to what it would have cost to construct my own home and to my own liking. Okay, so a few weeks passed, and they came back to me with an even better offer, an offer I could not refuse. And I always give the joke to people that when I got that offer, if myself and Usain Bolt had been in a race, he would have gotten the Bank of St. Lucia. He would have gotten the Bank of St. Lucia faster than me in order to put the arrangements in place to buy the house that I had been renting for the better part of 5 years. And I'm in that house 20 years later. I'm still there. I haven't moved, but I've enhanced it over time. And surprisingly, well, not surprising, rather, the same property I bought, the piece of land I bought 2001, 19 years ago, is still there, undeveloped. I mean, although it has gained in value and capital gain, but there's nothing happening on it, so to speak. Yeah.
But so okay, so you're now in this property you were renting. You got an offer you couldn't refuse.
Yeah.
Got your gold medal.
Yeah.
Got to the bank.
Yeah.
And you've enhanced it. Tell us about that enhancement in terms of the income suite and why.
Yeah. So the thinking is, initially, I mean, when you acquire your home, I think the mindset of most St. Lucians, I don't know, it was my mindset that, hey, this is my home, and I don't want to share it with anybody else except my wife and my immediate family. But I got exposed to a different thinking. I think there's a friend of mine, especially, who resided in Canada, and he himself had that ambition several years ago. I think you know him as well. You know that friend. And he had made moves in that direction. And there was always this conversation, of how this could be a new path that one could take. And of course, you travel. I traveled to England a couple of times, and I stayed at a relative of mine who was sharing a room in his house or renting a room in his house to students from another country. And all of these things started coming together and saying, hey, this is not a bad idea after all, And eventually led to me building a 2-bedroom apartment beneath my home. That was enough. It was high enough above the ground. The gradient was high enough. And I built a 2-bedroom apartment beneath my current home. And I, of course, rented it out in no time. Acquired some more funds, and then I built a second unit beneath that initial unit, a 1-bedroom apartment. And if you combine the income that I generate from these 2 apartments, it's more than what the mortgage of the home was at the time. I'm saying, well, why didn't I do this sooner? Why didn't I do this sooner so that somebody else could pay for my house? I would have been living in the house free of charge.
That's right, my brother. Wow, and I've had the privilege of of seeing that space. Very comfortable, very cozy. Thomas likens himself to be an interior
Mhm.
decorator. But what
Yeah.
caught my attention, while walking was uh, the opportunity for the next project, the Reno that you called me
Yes.
and we went to see. Tell us about
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
project, the thinking behind it, and why you thought it was a good opportunity.
Yeah. So, like I said, I mean, having tested what venturing into that area or real estate, as it were, the benefits that could be derived from it. So now my eyes were open for other opportunities,
Mm-hmm.
and I happened
Mm-hmm.
to come upon an opportunity I saw on Facebook. Incidentally, that's a building I saw on a fairly regular basis. I stood right past that building on a regular basis several years ago, and it's about 5 minutes from my current residence. And when I saw the price that it was being offered for, I could not believe it, and I said, "Wow, I need to get this. I need to lay my hands on this property." And so I arranged to have a viewing. And I'm telling you, it was not in a very good state aesthetically at the time, but I saw beyond that. I saw the potential that perhaps might have scared away somebody who didn't know what to look for. And in terms of what to look for, I think the most important thing is make sure the building is structurally sound. So it's wise to get an engineer to have a look at the structural integrity of the building. And by structural integrity, the things you want to look for would be the condition of the columns, if you can see those, or on the beams as well. So the columns will be those that are upright, and the beams are those that are horizontal. Make sure that there are no cracks in those two areas. The condition of your roof is very important. Make sure there's no leaks. So you check the ceiling to see that there are no leaks or termite damage. I think those are the three fundamental areas that you want to look at. Forget about paint work and kitchen cupboards and tiling and so forth. These are what I consider cosmetic. You can always change those things. But I think a lot of people were scared by what they saw, that the paint hadn't been painted probably for several years, a lot of mold and fungus, if you want to call it that. But I saw beyond that. And so I decided to take the plunge. The other thing as well, I mean, you do a valuation, and it turned out that the value of the building before I'd done anything to it it came out to be twice the amount I paid for the building. So the market value of the
Wow.
building was twice the amount
Wow.
of what I paid for it.
Wow.
So that was I got equity equivalent to the amount I was going to pay for the building right away without having done anything at all.
Buying below market value. As I said in the last
Yeah,
podcast, that is the most important
yeah,
part of real estate investing. Now, Thomas, I saw that building. You brought me to see that building, and I was scared. A
yeah.
lot of people see property investors
Mm.
and perhaps think that we look at every opportunity, but every opportunity is not for everyone. What
Yeah.
Well, two things. I was concerned about the layout. I was concerned about what would be the rent. How did you go about with the economics and the numbers for the investment? What was your thinking? Separate and apart from just you gaining equity on day one.
Mm.
What were your numbers
Yeah.
in terms of percentages, or what were you thinking?
Well, first of all, you go through your financial institution, and you get the amount that you have to pay for the structure in question. I mean, there's another tip as well. I mean, that I just just before I continue that area, I watched a lot of HGTV, and they always say buy the worst looking building on the block, But that's another thing. That's for another show, as you
On
might
the
say.
best street. On the
Um,
best street.
on the best street. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So what I did, and Sam, is I went to the financial institution, and of course they did the numbers and say, okay, this is the amount you'll have to pay on a monthly basis. Now, if it's a building that you're buying for income purposes, you'd want to get the loan for as long a period as possible. What I mean is, by doing that now, it means you're paying a smaller amount on a monthly basis. So, for instance, a 30-year loan, if you're buying a building for income purposes, is better than a 15-year loan, because it means you're paying more for a 15-year. You're paying more monthly as opposed to a 30. But it's good because, in the sense that you're not the one paying for it; it's somebody else paying for the building. So what I
Plus
did,
you're
of
gonna
course, like
enjoy
I said, I got
the plus you're gonna enjoy the excess rent between the net between
that's what I'm saying.
the
That's the
rent
whole
and the
point. That's the
mortgage.
whole point, to
You
keep as
can
much
live off
of
that.
the rent in as possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like I said, I did that. I calculated the number, the number of units, you know what it was. And then I asked myself, hey, if I were to rent each unit at X amount and accumulate the amount, how much would I be earning on a monthly basis? And when I did that calculation, of course, it turned out to be about 3 times more than what the mortgage payment would be on average. That in itself was a no-brainer. I mean, yeah. But also I had to make some changes in the configuration of the building. There was the building already designed to contain three apartments, and four, one of which contained 7 bedrooms, which is where the family occupied. But of course, I knew that the 7 bedrooms would not make sense. I could not get that rented to anybody at all. So I decided to split the 7-bedroom section into 2. So I took one of the largest bedrooms and converted it into a dining room, kitchen area. And so the 7 bedrooms became a 2-bedroom apartment. There were also 2 other small sections, I think, that were being used for a hairdressing facility. So I combined that into 1 apartment. And of course, the structure was there already to contain 3 other apartments. So in the end, a building that initially was housing 4 apartments was transformed into 6 apartments. Yeah.
What gave you the confidence, Thomas? Because I know you're a businessman. What gave you the confidence that you could have gone in there after the superficial kind of inspection, and then you have the engineering, that you would have gotten the right people to be able to give you what you want?
Well, the good thing is that I'd already done the 2 units at home. So that was like a kind of a dry run of sorts, you know?
Right.
So I had the experience. I supervised that construction myself. So like I engaged a contractor and say, hey, these are my drawings, these are my designs, blah, blah, blah. I supervised the construction on a day-to-day basis. And of course, the wife assisted with the decoration part. Because at home, one of the units is being used for long-term rental and another is short-term. So that was the same idea I had going forward with that building, that I'd do a mix in terms of the rental pool. I'd put some of it on the long-term market and some of it on the short-term market. Of course, the short-term market generates more revenue than the long-term market. And at that time, of course, the market was very healthy or very strong for short-term rentals. If you're all Airbnbs and Booking.com, I mean, that was growing by leaps and bounds. And I saw that. I'd seen it already with the 2 apartments that I had before. So I was sure that it would work, that it was trending towards that area in terms of more people coming in and wanting a different form of accommodation than a hotel, for instance.
During the process, what would you say were your biggest challenges?
Well, the thing is, at the time I was supervised. Well, in fact, I also supervised the renovation work at the new building, or the fixer-upper, so to speak. But I also had a full-time job. So it was difficult supervising and moving back and forth between my job and the project, and ensuring that it was done to your satisfaction, to your standards, because I was involved in every process. I mean, from the selection of the tiles, the color of the paint, the pictures that go on the walls, the finishing on the cupboards, and what have you. Every single detail I was involved in on a regular basis. So that was a challenge, like I said, juggling that responsibility with my corporate responsibilities, as it were.
And how were you able to overcome that?
Well, of course, you have a partner, like I said. So in those times where I couldn't, my partner would fall in. Luckily for me, the project was not too far away from my place of residence or my place of work. And also we have weekends as well, when you could schedule it. But like I said, I supervised the project myself, and I was able to, if there were times when I could not do the supervision, I would stop the work. Yeah, rather than let it go on and then something goes wrong and I have to go back and do a costly repair or fix, I just stop the work and let it stop for however long that I needed to come back and supervise it. So that was a challenge, because it means that it could take longer than you intend to get the project finished. But what I did as well, I did in phases. I didn't tackle the entire reno or the entire reno at one time. I took the biggest unit in the property, and within, I'd say, 2 to 3 months of acquiring the place, I already had a tenant move in into the property. So I was already earning revenue for the first one of the units, and it helped me again in financing the additional units. So it was not insurmountable. It was not a mammoth task that was overwhelming. So I did it apartment by apartment by apartment, and as soon as I finished, somebody moved in.
And you had no issue with getting tenants at all?
Nah, zero. Of course, I'm sure you're aware of the transitioning that has taken place in the rental market, in the sense that the short-term market has almost dried up because of the drastic fall in the number of visitors owing to COVID. But I managed to transition to the long-term market without difficulty at all. So it shows you there's still some buoyant demand for rental accommodation in different locations in St. Lucia. And I'd say the location I am probably helped because I'm about 10-15 minutes outside of Castries and also 10-15 minutes outside of Groseley. So almost smack in the middle of these two major towns,
Which happened to be the description of your Airbnb listing, smack in the middle.
Yeah, smack in the middle. And the smack in the middle, of course, like I said, smack in the middle of Groseley and Castries, yeah?
And Castries. Somebody listening right now might be interested in tackling a reno. What advice would you have for them, as they listen to this podcast?
Well, first of all, if that's the idea, speak to other persons who've done similarly. And as well, perhaps do it in phases. Don't tackle huge projects all at once, having not had the experience. And when examining the building, if it's a fixer-upper, pay attention to the fundamentals. Like I said, that would be the structural soundness of the building. So your beams, your columns, your roofing, these are the most important things. Don't be fooled by the cosmetics of the tile work or the paint work or the landscaping outside. All of this can be done without causing you to drill a hole in your pocket. So that would be my advice, essentially. And then show it, and also determine what it is you want it for. Is it for your home or for income? And that'll determine, of course, the length of time that you want to get a mortgage for. Yeah.
Well, there's so much. I feel like I just got a shot of adrenaline. Thomas, certainly thank you for that. While you speaking, one of the things that we took for granted was the fact that you knew the area, because you live literally 5 minutes away. So that helped. Anyone who would be thinking of doing that must certainly do their research in the area to understand demand, understand comparable pricing of rentals, and generally, what type of client you would get there. I like the fact that you had a mixed strategy, where you first of all did in phases, the upper floor first, and then you divided the rest of the units between short-term and long-term. Short-term gives you a lot more income, more changeover, more work, but long-term gives you that security.
Yeah. There are other little things as well I wanted to look at. Security in the area. Just do a general talk to persons who own homes in the area in terms of the security situation. Also the water supply, if there are any issues there, that determines whether you need to put in tanks or not. So that's important as well. Yeah.
Very, very, very important. These two things can make the quality of your living experience good or very, very, very bad. I learned a lot, because you and I discussed that already. I'm still not comfortable with renovation, but certainly it's an option for people. If you have the contacts, you have the experience, if you get deals like that you cannot pass up on, both for equity from day one, and secondly, just by knowing the potential income versus the price that you have to pay for the mortgage. So these are two key determining factors, I think, on whether or not you make that decision. And plus the disposition, your general disposition, and your willingness to go in that type of investment. Listeners, viewers, we want to thank you for joining us again. I want to thank Thomas for giving us, all of that, juicy information, tips on how to deal with a fixer-upper or reno, in St. Lucia and in the Caribbean generally. Remember, we're available on all podcast platforms: Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google, TuneIn, and many, many more, in addition to us also being on YouTube, Facebook, and of course, IG. Once again, thank you, and see you next week for another episode of Caribbean Property Investing.
Congratulations and thank you for tuning in to the Caribbean's first property investing podcast. We want to help Caribbean people create wealth and achieve financial freedom through property investing. Our show provides general advice based on personal experiences and is for educational purposes only. For more information, resources, and past episodes, visit us at CaribbeanPropertyInvesting.com. Remember to click the subscribe button so you never miss a show. Let's go.